Throughout history, some deaths have been so dramatic, so world-altering, that they echo through the ages. These aren't just endings, they're pivotal moments that reshaped the future. Today, we're journeying back in time to explore three of the most notorious and tragic deaths that history has never forgotten. Our first stop is ancient Athens, 399 BCE. Picture this. Socrates, one of the greatest thinkers of all time, the man who taught us to question everything, is on trial. His crime? Corrupting the youth and impiety. To us, it sounds absurd, but to the Athenian court it was a capital offense. Socrates could have proposed exile, but instead, he defiantly argued that the city should honor him for his service. The verdict came. Death. Surrounded by his devastated students, this philosophical titan was handed a cup of hemlock, a potent poison. He drank it calmly, discussing the nature of the soul until his very last breath. His death wasn't just the end of a man. It was a profound statement on justice, integrity, and the price of knowledge. Now, let's fast forward to Rome, 44 BCE, on the Ides of March. Julius Caesar, a brilliant general and politician who had risen to become dictator for life, strides into the Senate. He's at the height of his power, seemingly untouchable. But a conspiracy is brewing, led by senators who fear he's become too much like a king. As he takes his seat, they surround him. One by one, they draw their daggers. It's a brutal, frenzied attack. Legend says that upon seeing his trusted friend Marcus Brutus among the assassins, Caesar uttered the heartbreaking words, "Et tu, Brute?" You too, Brutus. His assassination didn't restore the Republic as the conspirators hoped. Instead, it plunged Rome into a bloody civil war, ultimately paving the way for the rise of the Roman Empire under his heir, Augustus. Our next story takes us to Egypt, 30 BCE. Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh, is a prisoner. She was a brilliant ruler, a skilled diplomat who spoke multiple languages, and a woman who captivated two of Rome's most powerful men, Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. After her and Antony's defeat against Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, her world crumbled. Faced with the humiliation of being paraded through Rome as a captive, Cleopatra chose to control her own destiny. The story goes that she had a venomous asp, a symbol of divine royalty, smuggled to her in a basket of figs. Its bite granted her a swift, regal end. Her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty, and the end of an independent Egypt, which now became a province of the burgeoning Roman Empire. Our next story takes us to the Roman province of Judea, around 30 CE. Here, a preacher named Jesus of Nazareth, who had gathered a significant following with his teachings of love, forgiveness, and a new covenant, was arrested. Accused of blasphemy and sedition, he was condemned to one of the most brutal forms of execution reserved for the lowest of criminals, crucifixion. To his followers, this horrific event was not an end, but a beginning. His death and subsequent belief in his resurrection became the cornerstone of Christianity, a faith that would grow from a small, persecuted sect into one of the world's major religions. The cross, once a symbol of Roman terror, was transformed into a global emblem of faith and redemption. From Judea, we travel across the Mediterranean to the intellectual heart of the ancient world, Alexandria, in the year 415 CE. This vibrant city was home to Hypatia, a brilliant philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician. A woman renowned for her intellect in a world dominated by men, she taught Neoplatonism and attracted students from all backgrounds. But Alexandria was also a city boiling with religious and political tension. In a tragic clash between the city's secular and religious powers, Hypatia became a target. She was dragged from her chariot by a fanatical mob and brutally murdered. Her death is often seen as a watershed moment, symbolizing the tragic conflict between reason and religious extremism and marking the beginning of the end for the classical world's intellectual freedom. Our next stop is in London, in the year 1305. A captured Scottish knight named William Wallace is brought before the English courts. For years, he had led a fierce rebellion against King Edward I's rule over Scotland, fighting for his nation's independence. Though he was a knight, he was denied a trial by his peers. Accused of treason, he was subjected to a gruesome public execution, designed to intimidate any who would dare defy the English crown. But the plan backfired spectacularly. Instead of being forgotten as a failed rebel, Wallace's martyrdom galvanized the Scottish people. He became a legendary national hero, the ultimate symbol of the fight for freedom. His story, immortalized in poems and later in film, continues to inspire a fierce sense of national pride and the enduring spirit of resistance against overwhelming odds. Now let's travel to 15th century France, a nation torn apart by the 100 Years' War. Amidst the chaos, a young peasant girl named Joan emerged, claiming to hear divine voices guiding her to save France. This was Joan of Arc. At just 17, she wasn't a noble or a trained soldier, but her unshakable faith and charisma were magnetic. She famously led the French army to a pivotal victory at the Siege of Orleans, turning the tide of the war and becoming a symbol of French hope. Her rise was meteoric, but it also made her powerful enemies. Just a year after her greatest triumph, Joan was captured by Burgundian forces, allies of the English. Instead of being treated as a prisoner of war, she was handed over to the English and put on trial for heresy. The trial was a sham, a political maneuver designed to discredit her and, by extension, the French king she had helped crown. They questioned her faith, her visions, and even her choice to wear men's clothing. Despite being an illiterate teenager facing a court of educated theologians, Joan's responses were remarkably witty and steadfast. But the verdict was a foregone conclusion. In May 1431, at the age of just 19, Joan of Arc was taken to the marketplace in Rouen and burned at the stake. It was a brutal public spectacle meant to crush French morale. But it had the opposite effect. Her martyrdom transformed her into an enduring legend. Years later, she was officially declared innocent, and in 1920, the Catholic Church canonized her as a saint, forever cementing her as a symbol of courage and conviction. Now let's jump forward to the Tudor court of England, a place of glamour, intrigue, and extreme danger, especially if you were married to King Henry VIII. Henry is famous for his 6 wives, and their fates are a grim reminder of the king's ruthless pursuit of a male heir and absolute power. 2 of his wives met particularly tragic ends, Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard. Anne Boleyn was the woman for whom Henry broke with the Catholic Church. He was desperate to marry her, hoping she would give him the son his first wife could not. But when Anne gave birth to a daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth I, and subsequently suffered miscarriages, Henry's affection turned to fury. In 1536, desperate to move on, he had Anne arrested on trumped-up charges of treason, adultery, and even witchcraft. The evidence was flimsy, but the outcome was certain. Anne Boleyn was beheaded at the Tower of London, a swift and shocking fall from grace for a woman who had once been the most powerful in England. Just a few years later, history repeated itself with Henry's 5th wife, Catherine Howard. A young, vivacious teenager, Catherine was married to the aging, ailing king. But whispers of her past and alleged infidelity during her marriage began to circulate. When evidence of a secret affair came to light, Henry's pride was wounded, and his reaction was merciless. Like Anne before her, Catherine was accused of treason. In February 1542, the young queen, not yet 20 years old, was also led to the executioner's block at the Tower of London. The fates of these 2 queens highlight the brutal reality of the Tudor court, where a woman's life depended entirely on the king's favor and her ability to produce a male heir. Our next story takes us to another queen whose life was a constant struggle for power, Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary became Queen of Scotland when she was just 6 days old. Her life was a whirlwind of political turmoil. She was also next in line to the English throne after her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I, which made her a constant threat. After being forced to abdicate her Scottish throne, Mary fled to England in 1568, seeking protection from Elizabeth. Instead, she found a gilded cage. Fearing Mary would become a figurehead for Catholic plots to overthrow her, Elizabeth placed her under house arrest. For nearly 19 years, Mary was moved from castle to castle, a queen in name, but a prisoner in reality. Eventually, a plot to assassinate Elizabeth was uncovered, and letters implicating Mary sealed her fate. Despite her insistence of innocence, she was tried for treason. Elizabeth agonized over signing the death warrant for a fellow anointed queen, but she ultimately did. In February 1587, Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed. Her death was notoriously gruesome, but it ended the immediate threat to Elizabeth's throne and secured the future of Protestant England. Now for this one, Galileo Galilei. Imagine being so brilliant, so ahead of your time, that the most powerful institution in the world decides to lock you away. That was Galileo's reality. In 1633, for daring to suggest that the earth revolved around the sun, a concept that contradicted church doctrine, he was tried by the Inquisition and sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his life. For nearly a decade, this giant of astronomy lived in confinement, his health slowly failing. He went blind, suffering from fevers and hernias, yet he continued his scientific work almost until his last breath. In 1642, at the age of 77, Galileo died, still a prisoner in his own home. He wasn't just a man who died, he was a symbol of the conflict between science and dogma, a martyr for free thought whose ideas would eventually be proven right for all the world to see. His death wasn't a grand spectacle, but a quiet, tragic end for a man who had shown us the universe. Next, we jump forward to the height of the French Revolution, a time of radical change and terrifying violence. At the center of it all were King Louis XVII and Queen Marie Antoinette. Once the most powerful couple in France, their lavish lifestyle at the Palace of Versailles became a symbol of everything the starving revolutionaries despised. As the monarchy crumbled, the royal family attempted a desperate escape, but were captured and imprisoned. The momentum of the revolution was unstoppable. Louis XVI was put on trial for treason, and in January 1793, he was taken to the Place de la Révolution in Paris. In front of a massive crowd, the former king was executed by guillotine. His final words were reportedly drowned out by the roll of drums. Just 9 months later, his wife, Marie Antoinette, met the same fate. Vilified and accused of countless crimes, she faced her execution with a composure that surprised many. The deaths of the king and queen were not just personal tragedies, they were the bloody and definitive end of an absolute monarchy in France, and a chilling statement about the power of the people. Let's move on. We turn to one of the most formidable military and political leaders in history, Napoleon Bonaparte. After a reign that reshaped Europe, his downfall at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 led to his exile on the remote and desolate island of St. Helena in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. This was a prison from which there would be no escape. For 6 years, Napoleon lived under constant British guard, his health steadily declining. He died in 1821 at the age of 51. The official cause was stomach cancer, and his own father had died of the same disease. But almost immediately, rumors began to swirl. Was it really cancer, or was he slowly poisoned with arsenic by his captors to prevent any chance of a return to power? Modern analysis of his hair samples has shown high levels of arsenic, but this could have come from environmental factors of the time. The debate rages on to this day. Was it a slow, painful illness, or a clandestine assassination? This mystery surrounding Napoleon's death only adds to the legend of a man who seemed larger than life, whose final chapter is as debated as his famous battles. Let's start in the aftermath of the American Civil War. The year is 1865. The nation, battered and bruised, is just beginning the arduous process of healing. President Abraham Lincoln, the man who steered the Union to victory and fought to end slavery, is looking toward a future of reconciliation. On the evening of April 14th, he decides to attend a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. It's meant to be a moment of relaxation, a brief respite from the immense pressures of his office. But a shadow lurks in the wings. John Wilkes Booth, a well-known actor and a fervent Confederate sympathizer, sees Lincoln not as a leader, but as a tyrant. Fueled by a bitter sense of defeat, Booth slips into the presidential box. A single shot rings out. The president slumps forward. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln plunged a nation already in mourning into a state of profound shock and grief. The leader who had preached malice toward none, with charity for all, was gone, leaving the monumental task of reconstruction without its chief architect. His death left a deep scar on the American psyche and raised questions about the nation's path forward that would echo for generations. Now let's travel across the Atlantic to the early 20th century. Europe is a complex web of alliances, empires, and simmering tensions. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is visiting Sarajevo with his wife Sophie. Their visit is a display of imperial power in a region restless with nationalist desires. As their motorcade moves through the city, a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip steps from the crowd. He, too, is driven by a powerful ideology. The dream of a unified South Slavic state, free from Austro-Hungarian rule. He fires his pistol twice. The first shot hits Sophie, the second hits the Archduke. Within moments, both are dead. While their deaths were tragic, few could have predicted the cataclysm that would follow. Austria-Hungary, outraged, issued an ultimatum to Serbia. Alliances clicked into place like dominoes. Russia backed Serbia. Germany backed Austria-Hungary, and soon, France and Britain were drawn in. The assassination in Sarajevo was the spark that ignited the powder keg of Europe, plunging the world into the unprecedented devastation of World War I, a conflict that would redraw maps and claim millions of lives. A few years later, the consequences of that same war would bring down one of history's most powerful dynasties. By 1918, Russia was in turmoil. Defeats in World War I, coupled with severe food shortages and social unrest, led to the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II, the last emperor of the Romanov dynasty. The family, Nicholas, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children, were placed under house arrest. As the Russian Civil War raged between the Bolshevik Red Army and the anti-communist White Army, the fate of the imperial family hung in the balance. In the early hours of July 17, 1918, in a cellar in Yekaterinburg, the family was awakened and told to dress. They were led down into a small room, believing they were being moved for their own safety. Instead, a group of Bolshevik guards entered and read out an execution order. A volley of gunfire erupted, brutally ending over 300 years of Romanov rule. This act was not just the end of a family. It was the violent, definitive end of the old Russian monarchy and the symbolic birth of a new revolutionary state that would reshape global politics for the rest of the 20th century. Rasputin, the Mad Monk, was a controversial figure in the court of Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. Many believed his influence over the Tsarina was a danger to the empire. In December 1916, a group of nobles decided to take matters into their own hands. Their plot sounds like something straight out of a thriller movie. They allegedly fed Rasputin cakes and wine laced with a massive amount of cyanide. When the poison seemingly had no effect, they shot him. But even that, legend says, wasn't enough. Rasputin reportedly revived, prompting his attackers to shoot him again, beat him, and finally throw his body into the icy Neva River. While historical accounts debate some of the more sensational details, the sheer brutality and determination of his assassins highlight the intense political turmoil that was about to boil over into the Russian Revolution. His death was a violent prelude to the end of an entire empire. Now let's turn to a man whose life was the polar opposite of Rasputin's, Mahatma Gandhi. He was a global icon of peace and nonviolent resistance, the spiritual and political leader who guided India to independence from British rule. His message was one of unity, love, and tolerance. Tragically, it was this very message that led to his death. On January 30th, 1948, just months after India achieved its hard-won freedom, Gandhi was on his way to a prayer meeting in New Delhi. He was approached by a man who bowed, then fired 3 shots at point-blank range. His assassin was a Hindu nationalist who opposed Gandhi's vision of a secular India where Hindus and Muslims could coexist peacefully. Gandhi's last words were reportedly, "He Rama," meaning "O God." His assassination sent shockwaves across the globe. The man who had faced down an empire with peace was killed by an act of violent hatred. His death remains a profound and painful reminder of the price that is sometimes paid for championing peace in a world rife with division. Next, we come to a death that marked the end of one of history's darkest chapters, the suicide of Adolf Hitler. As April 1945 drew to a close, the war in Europe was all but over. Soviet forces were closing in on Berlin, fighting their way through the city's streets, getting closer and closer to the heart of the Nazi regime. Trapped in his underground bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, Hitler faced the inevitable. The empire he had promised would last 1,000 years was crumbling above his head. On April 30th, refusing to be captured and face public trial, Hitler and his newlywed wife, Eva Braun, ended their own lives. Braun bit into a cyanide capsule. Hitler is believed to have done the same while also shooting himself in the head. Their bodies were carried outside, doused in gasoline, and set on fire in a shallow crater. It was a grim, pathetic end for a man who had plunged the world into unprecedented chaos and destruction. His death wasn't a noble sacrifice or a tragic assassination. It was the cowardly final act of a failed dictator, bringing a definitive end to the war in Europe and his reign of terror. Now, for the story of a young girl whose voice has echoed through generations. Anne Frank. Born in 1929, Anne was a vibrant Jewish teenager who dreamt of becoming a writer. When the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands forced her family into hiding in 1942, she began documenting her life in a diary. For 2 years, she wrote with incredible wisdom and wit about her fears, her hopes, and her observations of life confined to a secret annex. In August 1944, the hiding place was betrayed. Anne and her family were arrested and sent to concentration camps. After enduring unimaginable conditions, Anne and her sister Margot were transferred to Bergen-Belsen. There, in early 1945, just weeks before the camp was liberated, both sisters succumbed to typhus. Anne was only 15 years old. Her father, Otto Frank, the sole survivor of the family, later published her diary. The Diary of a Young Girl became one of the most widely read books in the world. A powerful testament to the human spirit in the face of inhumanity, and a personal face to the millions lost in the Holocaust. Next, we travel to November 22, 1963, a day seared into the American psyche. President John F. Kennedy, the youthful and charismatic leader of a nation on the brink of profound social change, was riding in a motorcade through Dallas, Texas. The crowds were cheering, the sun was shining. It was a picture of American optimism. Suddenly, gunshots rang out. President Kennedy was struck, and the world watched in horror as the day turned from a political rally into a national tragedy. His assassination sent shockwaves across the globe and plunged the United States into a period of deep mourning and uncertainty. The event spawned countless investigations and conspiracy theories, making it one of the most debated moments in history. JFK's presidency, often romanticized as Camelot, was cut short, leaving behind a legacy of inspiration and a lingering question of, what if? He challenged a generation to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. a call to service that continues to resonate today. Less than 5 years later, another monumental leader was taken from the world. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the conscience of the civil rights movement, had dedicated his life to the non-violent struggle for racial equality. His powerful speeches and unwavering commitment to justice had transformed a nation. On April 4, 1968, Dr. King was in Memphis, Tennessee, to support striking sanitation workers. As he stood on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, a single gunshot ended his life. He was just 39 years old. His assassination sparked riots in cities across America, a raw outpouring of grief and rage from a community that had lost its foremost champion of peace. Dr. King had a dream of a nation where individuals would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Though his life was tragically cut short, that dream did not die with him. His legacy continues to inspire movements for freedom and equality worldwide, a timeless reminder that the moral arc of the universe, while long, bends toward justice. Now let's travel back to June 5, 1968. Robert F. Kennedy, brother of the late President John F. Kennedy, had just won the crucial California presidential primary. The ballroom of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles was electric with hope. RFK represented a continuation of his brother's ideals, but with a renewed focus on civil rights and ending the Vietnam War. He was seen by many as the man who could heal a deeply divided nation. As he left the stage through a kitchen pantry, gunshots rang out. Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated, and with him, many believed the hopes of a generation died too. His death fundamentally altered the course of American politics and left a gaping wound in the nation's psyche, a profound sense of what if. Just a year later, in the summer of '69, another tragedy would expose a different, more sinister side of the cultural landscape. Sharon Tate was a rising Hollywood star, celebrated for her beauty and talent, and she was 8.5 months pregnant. She embodied the glamour and optimism of the swinging '60s. On the night of August 9th, members of the Manson family cult broke into her home and committed a horrific act of violence, ending her life and the lives of 4 others. This wasn't a political assassination. It was something else entirely. The senselessness of the murders sent a wave of fear and paranoia through society. It was as if the peace and love dream of the hippie movement had curdled into a nightmare, marking a symbolic end to the innocence of the decade. Now let's turn our attention to South America, to September 11, 1973. Salvador Allende was the democratically elected socialist president of Chile. His government aimed to create a more equitable society through land reform and nationalization of key industries. But his policies faced fierce opposition, both internally and from powerful international interests. On that day, a military coup, led by General Augusto Pinochet, besieged the presidential palace. The details of Allende's final moments remain a subject of intense debate. The official report states he took his own life, rather than surrendered to the coup forces. Others believe he was killed during the assault. Regardless of the exact circumstances, Allende's death marked the end of Chile's democratic experiment and the beginning of a brutal 17-year dictatorship. It stands as a tragic symbol of a political dream crushed by force, a story that resonates across Latin America and the world. Let's travel back to 1977. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was more than just a musician. He was a cultural phenomenon. His charisma, his voice, and his electrifying stage presence had captivated millions. But behind the dazzling jumpsuits and sold-out concerts, Elvis was struggling. On August 16th, the world was stunned by the news. Elvis was found dead at his Graceland home at the age of just 42. While his official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest, it was later revealed that his health had been severely compromised by years of prescription drug misuse. The king was gone, and the suddenness of it all left a generation of fans heartbroken. His death marked the end of an era, a tragic final curtain call for one of music's greatest legends. Just 3 years later, another musical icon was tragically taken from the world. John Lennon, the creative force behind the Beatles and a powerful voice for peace, was living in New York City with his wife, Yoko Ono. On the evening of December 8, 1980, as they returned to their apartment building, the Dakota, a man who had received his autograph earlier that day, stepped out of the shadows. In an act of senseless violence, Mark David Chapman shot Lennon 4 times. He died on the way to the hospital. The news spread like wildfire, and an outpouring of grief swept across the globe. Spontaneous vigils were held as fans mourned not just the loss of a brilliant artist, but a symbol of hope and idealism. Lennon's murder wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a brutal reminder of the darkness that can exist in the world, extinguishing a light that had inspired so many. Our next story takes us to the world of politics. Indira Gandhi was one of the most powerful and controversial figures of the 20th century. As the Prime Minister of India, she led the world's largest democracy with a firm and often divisive hand. In June 1984, she ordered a military operation on the Golden Temple, the holiest shrine for Sikhs, to flush out militants who had taken refuge there. This act deeply offended many in the Sikh community. On the morning of October 31, 1984, as she walked through the garden of her residence in New Delhi, 2 of her own Sikh bodyguards, men sworn to protect her, turned their weapons on her in an act of revenge. They fired more than 30 bullets. Her assassination by those she trusted most sent a shockwave of horror through India and the world, leading to a period of violent unrest. It was a brutal end to a powerful reign and a stark illustration of how political actions can have deeply personal and fatal consequences. Let's travel back to a cold winter night in Stockholm, 1986. Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme and his wife, Lisbeth, were walking home from the cinema, casually, with no bodyguards. It was a testament to Sweden's open and trusting society. But that trust was shattered in an instant. A lone gunman approached them from behind, fired 2 shots, and disappeared into the night. Olof Palme was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. The assassination sent shock waves across the globe. How could a world leader be murdered so brazenly in one of the safest countries on earth? The investigation became one of the largest in history. For 34 years, the case remained a baffling cold case. Thousands were questioned. A petty criminal was wrongfully convicted and later acquitted, and countless theories emerged, blaming everyone from foreign intelligence agencies to extremist groups. It wasn't until 2020 that prosecutors finally named a suspect, Stig Engström, a graphic designer who was at the scene and had a known disdain for Palme's politics. However, Engström had died in the year 2000, so the case was closed without a trial, leaving a permanent sense of unease and a question mark over Swedish history. Just over a decade later, in the summer of 1997, the world was rocked by another tragedy, this time in Paris. Princess Diana, the People's Princess, was relentlessly pursued by paparazzi after leaving the Ritz Hotel with her companion, Dodi Fayed. Their car, attempting to outrun the photographers, sped into the Pont de l'Alma tunnel and crashed violently. Dodi and the driver, Henry Paul, died instantly. Diana was rushed to the hospital but succumbed to her injuries hours later. The news of her death triggered an unprecedented wave of global mourning. Flowers piled up outside Buckingham and Kensington palaces, creating a sea of tributes. People who had never met her wept, as if they had lost a close friend. Diana's charisma, humanitarian work, and her complicated relationship with the royal family had made her an icon. In the aftermath, the public's anger was directed at the paparazzi, whose aggressive pursuit was widely blamed for the crash. Official investigations concluded that the crash was caused by the driver, who was under the influence and driving at excessive speed. Despite this, conspiracy theories have persisted for years, alleging everything from a planned assassination to a faked death. But beyond the speculation, Diana's legacy endures through her sons and the charitable causes she championed. The same summer, just a few weeks before Diana's death, another icon was tragically taken. On the morning of July 15, 1997, the legendary fashion designer Gianni Versace returned to his Miami Beach mansion after a morning walk. As he stood on his front steps, he was shot and killed by Andrew Cunanan. The fashion world was plunged into shock and disbelief. Versace wasn't just a designer, he was the king of 90s glamour, a creative genius who blended high art with pop culture and celebrated life with his bold, vibrant creations. His murder felt like a personal attack on beauty and creativity itself. The killer, Andrew Cunanan, was already on the FBI's 10 most wanted list for a string of murders across the country. His motive for killing Versace remains a mystery. Some speculate they had met before, while others believe Versace was simply a random, high-profile victim in Cunanan's spree. The nationwide manhunt ended 8 days later when Cunanan was found dead on a nearby houseboat, having taken his own life. The murder of Gianni Versace marked a dark end to a dazzling era, but his sister, Donatella, bravely took over the fashion house, ensuring that the Versace name and its legacy of audacious style would live on. Now a story of a dynasty's dashed hopes. John F. Kennedy Jr., born into American royalty, was the handsome, charismatic son of President John F. Kennedy. He seemed destined for greatness, carrying the weight of his family's legacy with grace. On July 16, 1999, JFK Jr., his wife Carolyn Bessette, and her sister Lauren were flying his private plane to a family wedding. Tragically, they never arrived. The plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. The news sent shockwaves across the nation. For many, JFK Jr. represented the last vestige of the Camelot era, a bright light of hope and potential. His sudden death at just 38 years old was not just a personal family tragedy, but the heartbreaking end of a chapter in American history, leaving behind a profound sense of what might have been. Next, we remember a man whose passion for the wild was infectious. Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, was a global icon. With his trademark khaki shorts, boundless energy, and catchphrase, "Crikey," he brought the wonders of the animal kingdom into our living rooms. He wasn't just an entertainer. He was a dedicated conservationist who taught a generation to love and respect animals, even the ones that seemed scary. On September 4, 2006, the world was stunned by the news of his death. While filming a documentary on the Great Barrier Reef, a short-tailed stingray struck him in the chest. It was a freak accident, a one-in-a-million event. The man who had fearlessly handled crocodiles and snakes was taken by a creature not typically considered aggressive. Steve Irwin's passing left a massive void in the world of wildlife conservation. His legacy, however, lives on through his family and the Australia Zoo, continuing his vital mission to protect our planet's incredible creatures. We now turn to the world of politics and the story of a trailblazing leader. Benazir Bhutto was a force of nature. In 1988, she broke barriers by becoming the first woman to be elected prime minister of a Muslim-majority country, Pakistan. Her political career was a roller coaster of triumphs and tribulations, marked by exile, corruption charges, and a relentless fight for democracy. She was a powerful symbol of female empowerment and progressive ideals in a region often dominated by tradition. On December 27, 2007, Bhutto was campaigning for re-election in Rawalpindi. As she waved to supporters from her vehicle after a political rally, an attacker shot at her before detonating a bomb. Her assassination sent shockwaves through Pakistan and the international community. It was a brutal end for a leader who had survived so much and represented hope for a more democratic future for her nation. Her death was a devastating blow to Pakistan and a tragic loss for the world. Now, on a day music truly died, June 25, 2009. The news broke like a sonic boom across every screen and radio wave. Michael Jackson was gone. The king of pop, a man whose music and dance moves had defined generations, had passed away at just 50 years old. He was in the middle of preparing for a massive comeback tour, This Is It, with sold-out shows in London. Fans were eagerly anticipating his return to the stage. But instead of a triumphant comeback, the world was plunged into mourning. The initial shock quickly turned to confusion. How could this seemingly immortal icon suddenly die? The story that unfolded was far more complex than anyone imagined. It wasn't a natural cause. The Los Angeles County coroner ruled his death a homicide caused by a fatal combination of prescription drugs, most notably propofol and lorazepam. His personal physician, Conrad Murray, had been administering the powerful anesthetic to help Jackson sleep. This revelation launched a massive investigation and a highly publicized trial that dominated headlines for months. The world grappled with the dark side of fame, the pressures of performance, and the tragic circumstances that led to the loss of a true global superstar. The legacy of Michael Jackson is a dazzling, complicated tapestry of genius and tragedy, and his death remains one of its most heartbreaking chapters. Just 2 years later, in 2011, the world's attention was fixed on North Africa, specifically Libya. The Arab Spring was in full force, and after 42 years of iron-fisted rule, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's regime was crumbling. Once one of the world's most feared and eccentric dictators, he was now a fugitive in his own country. For months, rebel forces, backed by NATO airstrikes, had been closing in on him. The final chapter of his rule came on October 20th, 2011. After an intense firefight in his hometown of Sirte, Gaddafi was discovered by revolutionary fighters hiding in a drainage pipe. The chaotic and grainy cell phone footage that emerged shortly after was raw and brutal, showing the disheveled and bloodied dictator being captured. The exact circumstances of his final moments are still debated, but what's clear is that he was killed shortly after being taken into custody. His death marked the symbolic end of a long and violent era for Libya, but it also ushered in a period of intense instability and civil conflict that continues to this day. Unlike the mourning for a beloved artist, Gaddafi's death was met with celebration in the streets of Libya and complex reactions around the world, a violent end to a violent reign. The following year, another icon from the music world was taken from us far too soon. On February 11, 2012, the day before the Grammy Awards, Whitney Houston was found dead in her hotel room in Beverly Hills. She was only 48. Known simply as The Voice, Whitney was one of the best-selling artists of all time, a powerhouse vocalist whose songs like I Will Always Love You became the soundtrack for millions of lives. Her talent was undeniable, a force of nature that seemed effortless. However, behind the incredible success, Whitney had a long and very public struggle with substance abuse. Her death, ruled an accidental drowning with heart disease and drug use as contributing factors, felt both shocking and tragically inevitable to many. It was a devastating end to a career that had reached dizzying heights, but was also marked by deep personal turmoil. The world mourned not just the loss of an incredible talent, but also the woman behind The Voice, who fought battles that ultimately overwhelmed her. Her death, like Michael Jackson's, served as another painful reminder of the immense pressures that come with global superstardom. We now jump to 2014, with a loss that felt deeply personal for millions. When we heard the news about Robin Williams, it was like a light went out. This was the man who had been our genie, our Peter Pan, our favorite teacher. He was a whirlwind of comedic energy, a master of improvisation whose mind worked faster than anyone could keep up with. But behind that brilliant spark was a private battle with depression, and as we later learned, a debilitating neurological disease called Lewy body dementia. His death was a profound shock that forced a global conversation we desperately needed to have. It stripped away the stigma and showed that mental health struggles can affect anyone, even those who bring so much joy to others. It was a wake-up call, reminding us that the brightest smiles can sometimes hide the deepest pain. Robin's legacy isn't just in his incredible body of work. It's also in the countless people who felt empowered to seek help because of his story. He taught us to carpe diem, seize the day, and his passing reminded us to also care for one another. If you or someone you know is struggling, please remember that help is available. Resources and support lines are always there for you. Just 6 years later, on a foggy January morning in 2020, the world stood still again. The news was unbelievable. Kobe Bryant, his daughter Gianna, and 7 others were gone in a helicopter crash. It was a sudden, gut-wrenching tragedy that reverberated far beyond the world of basketball. Kobe wasn't just an athlete, he was an icon of dedication, a symbol of what became known as the Mamba mentality. It was a mindset of relentless pursuit of greatness, of working harder than everyone else, not just to win, but to be the best possible version of yourself. For a generation, he was the player you watched with your parents, the one whose posters adorned bedroom walls. After his retirement, we saw a new side of him, a devoted father, a mentor, an Oscar-winning storyteller. The outpouring of grief was immense. Murals appeared on walls across the globe, arenas filled with fans wearing his jersey, and the world mourned not just a legend, but a father and a daughter with so much life left to live. His death was a stark reminder of life's fragility and the importance of cherishing every moment with the people we love. He inspired us to be better on the court, and his passing inspired us to be better in life. In September 2022, the world witnessed a different kind of passing, one that felt like the closing of a major chapter in modern history. After a reign spanning 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II passed away at the age of 96. She was a constant in a world of constant change. For most people on Earth, she was the only British monarch they had ever known. She ascended to the throne in a post-war era and guided the monarchy through decades of immense social, political, and technological transformation. She met with prime ministers from Winston Churchill to Liz Truss, witnessed the fall of the British Empire, the dawn of the Internet age, and so much more. Her unwavering sense of duty, her quiet dignity, and her steadfast presence made her a symbol of stability for the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. Her passing wasn't just the loss of a queen, it was the end of the Second Elizabethan age. The images from her funeral, the massive crowds lining the streets, the global leaders in attendance, the solemn pageantry, spoke to the scale of her impact. She was a living link to history, and her death marked a profound collective moment of reflection on time, duty, and the end of an era. Finally, we turn to a more recent and politically charged event. In early 2024, the world received grim news about Alexei Navalny, Russia's most prominent opposition leader. He had risen to fame as an anti-corruption blogger, fearlessly exposing what he alleged was vast graft within the Russian government. His charisma, sharp wit, and modern use of social media made him a powerful voice for a different vision of Russia. He survived a poisoning attempt in 2020, an event that drew international condemnation. Yet, in a display of incredible courage, he chose to return to Russia in 2021, where he was immediately arrested. His death in an Arctic penal colony was announced in February 2024. Though the circumstances remain heavily disputed and have been met with skepticism and outrage from world leaders and human rights organizations. For his supporters, Navalny was a symbol of hope and defiance against authoritarianism. His fate became a stark and tragic flashpoint in the ongoing struggle for political freedom. His death wasn't just the loss of one man. For many, it represented the extinguishment of a bright flame of opposition and a grim testament to the high price of dissent in the modern world. His story serves as a powerful and sobering reminder of the ongoing global fight for democracy and human rights. From 399 BC Athens, all the way today, these individuals, in their deaths, left an indelible mark on our collective consciousness. They sparked conversations, brought people together in shared grief, and defined historical moments. Their stories remind us of the power of a single life to inspire, to lead, and to change the world. Thank you so much for joining me for this reflective journey. If you found this video meaningful, Please give it a like and consider subscribing for more content. Let me know in the comments which other historical figures have left a lasting impact on you. Until next time, take care.